Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Hellenic Initiative's second Digital Speakers Series event. This week with Diana Dukas, Manager of Economic Impact for U.S. Policy Programs at Facebook, and being moderated by Eunice Bueller, who's a co-chair of THI's New Leaders. This is, as I mentioned, our second event. Our event last week with Doctors Yankopoulos and Kiratsous of Regeneron was attended by thousands of people. We're very pleased at the result, and I also would like to thank everyone, the hundreds of people who made donations online. And in fact, I'll just start off by saying, you can visit THI's website at www.thehellenicinitiative.org if you're interested in signing up for our newsletter and supporting our COVID-19 campaign, which this campaign is what spurred us starting this Digital Speaker Series event. So today we have with us Diana Dukas from Facebook. If you've ever had the pleasure of meeting Diana's parents, Peter and Lynn, and her godmother, Patty Dukas, Zandy, you'll understand why she turned out to be such an exceptional person. Before starting her current position at Facebook, Diana served as the Senior Vice President of Social Responsibility and Government Affairs at Libra, which is a company owned by THI's board member, George Logothetis. And Diana worked in CSR with our good friend, Jimmy Athanasopoulos there. At Libra, she managed Libra's 9 philanthropic platforms. Prior to Libra, Diana served as the director of the White House Business Council for President Obama, where she worked closely with business leaders from Fortune 500 companies and small and medium enterprises to identify opportunities for collaboration on the administration's policy priorities, including international trade, pay equity, and workforce development. Addition to her exceptional resume, she also served as the White House liaison at the U.S. Small Business Administration. We're very pleased to have Diana with us today, and she's going to be speaking with us about Facebook's response to COVID-19. And then the talk is being moderated by Eunice Bueller. Eunice, I should just also mention that Diana's family comes from Mani, actually from a region south of Yuthian, and I know that because we're cousins. So now I'd like to also introduce Eunice Bueller, who's as I mentioned earlier, is the co-chair of THI's New Leaders. Eunice is based in Chicago right now, and I should mention that Diana is based in Washington, D.C. To know the Bueller family is to love and respect them. Eunice has been serving as the co-chair of our New Leaders basically since its inception. Our New Leaders is our young and professional THI group, 40 years and younger, which has grown exponentially in the last few years under her leadership, along with her co-chairs, Chris Koulakos and Alex Ziris, who's based in Los Angeles. Eunice is currently working with a company called Intelliquent, where she's the associate. Before that, she was an associate at the law firm of Kirkland & Ellis, where she primarily advised private equity firms and private companies on strategic and financial mergers and acquisitions. She's been recognized for her pro bono work and her service to numerous local and national organizations, including the Pan-Hellenic Scholarship Foundation, which she and her family basically run in Chicago, it's an amazing organization, which supports Greek scholars every year and hands out hundreds of scholarships. The format of today's event is 30 minutes of moderated questions with Eunice and Diana, and that will be followed by approximately 30 minutes of Q&A from the audience. So we ask people to send their questions via Facebook or email so we can collect them and make sure that they get, we have to obviously can't ask all the questions because last time we got hundreds of questions, but we'll ask as many questions as we can. So having said all that, we're pleased to get started, and I'd like to welcome Eunice Bueller.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you for everyone for tuning in. We're really excited to have you. Welcome. I'm Eunice Bueller. As Peter mentioned, THI is doing really phenomenal work at this challenging time. THI is supporting cancer patients who cannot access their usual treatments due to COVID, is supporting domestic violence helplines in response to the spike in domestic violence, and has recently launched a program to virtually mentor cash-strapped Greek startups among many other impactful efforts. Thank you in advance for your support of THI. It does a great deal of good in a time when it's much needed. I'm here today with Diana Dukas, the Manager for Economic Impact of US Policy Programs at Facebook. Diana has a successful career in democratic politics, has worked in the White House, ran the social responsibility arm at the Libra Group, and is coming to us live today from Washington, D.C. As Peter said, Diana has graciously agreed to take questions from the audience. So if you have a question for Diana, please add your question to the Facebook Live feed, or you're welcome to add it to the Q&A portion of the Zoom platform. Diana, welcome to Sasanesti.
I love Honesty. Thank you so much for having me, Peter and Eunice both. Thank you for the very generous introduction. And I should say, if I'm so lucky to be family members with Peter, and just thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're really glad you're here, and we're thrilled to learn about your impressive career and about the important things that Facebook is doing in response to the recent pandemic. However, I was hoping that we could start by taking it back and learning a little bit about your roots. Could you please tell us a bit about your connection to Hellenism?
Absolutely. And so as Peter mentioned, the majority of my family is from Mani. Both my papus came over in the early 1900s and immediately started giving back and being very close, staying close to their Greek roots. My papu on my mother's side, George Borney, came over to make sure that he was able to pursue his educational dreams. When he got here to live with a family member, it turned out that the family member really wanted him to work in the business and wasn't going to allow him to go to school. But leaning on the Greek community that my papu had found, was able to go live with members of the Greek church, and they supported him to enable him to go get his education, a law degree, and then he ended up helping found one of the chapters of AHEPA. My papu on my dad's side had come over, had a wonderful career in engineering, found himself working on the LEM, the lunar module that was a part of Apollo 11. And that started what I believe is an incredibly strong history in our family, but also moving back into our roots as Hellenes of giving back, community service, being mission oriented, and really staying true to our roots and to our community. My parents were both educators and instilled in me a very strong sense of community and, again, giving back and making sure that you're making your community better than when you found it. And so I've been very fortunate to have such role models in my life and with such a strong Greek connection.
Yeah, it's clear that, looking at your career path, that you're a very purpose-driven person, and it's interesting to hear about how that comes from a lot of what you've learned from your family. What are some of the things that you fundamentally believe in, and what are some of the purposes that you'd like to further?
I'm sorry, my internet, of course, cut out. Can you repeat that, Eunice?
I was just saying, given that your family and your papu, all your grandparents have set such a great example for you in being a purpose-driven person, and that's clear based on the career path that you've taken, that you have put that to use. What are some of the purposes that you'd like to further? What do you really believe in? What drives you?
So I have been incredibly lucky throughout my career to work for individuals or entities and organizations that I have found and believe that I personally believe were meant to better society. And so from the beginning of my career, I've served at the nexus of government and the business community, believing that, and nonprofits, but believing that business can't do it alone.
I think we might have lost you for one more time, Diana. I'm not sure.
Did we lose Diana?
Maybe she's coming back.
Diana? That's my dog, in case anybody was wondering.
Okay, it looks like she's going to log back in, so we'll need a minute.
Well, in the meantime, I would really have been impressed by the effort that THI has done to help people with cancer, because I personally have a very close, essentially family member in Greece who is a person who's going through cancer. And the fact that THI has thought of helping a lot of people really in need during a time when they can't access their regular hospital treatment is a really powerful thing. And I love how THI is thinking, so as you always do, as our team always does, thinking so holistically, thinking about people's basic needs, continuing poverty alleviation efforts, and responding to whatever happens in Greece. It's been really great to see. Oh, great, we have Diana back.
Diana.
I think we have you back, Diana.
Diana.
I'm back. Well, sort of.
Great.
Apologies, I'm now calling in from my phone because the internet went out.
That's even more a sign of how, we have to be adaptable and flexible this time.
Sorry about that, but I'm back.
Okay. Well, we're glad you're back. Please, you were continuing, you were saying you were talking about some of the things that you feel are important to you and drive you.
Thank you. And so just being able to make sure that we're supporting one another. I think what you've seen, the beauty out of this awful crisis that we find ourselves in, is that we are our societies are giving back and finding creative ways to serve one another. And so that actually has been one of the best parts of working at Facebook at this time. We have seen people use our tools to make sure that they're checking in on one another, to make sure that neighbors don't need help with their groceries. We're helping people connect if they're members of the faith community, and making sure that they feel the sense of community that they usually get from their place of worship, making sure that they can find that online. And it's really a sense of bringing people together. And that's something I've always wanted to pursue throughout my career.
Yeah, that's great. And it's really cool to see that a lot of that THI is pursuing. We see these efforts to help people in the private sector, in the public sector, and it's great to see that businesses like Facebook are really stepping up to the plate to help people. What are some other ways that Facebook has stepped up to help the community during the COVID pandemic?
Sure. So I'm very fortunate to be able to work on our economic impact work. And a lot of that means supporting the small business community. And as so many of us know, small businesses are the backbone of our economy. And unfortunately, they are facing incredibly challenging times right now. And so while Facebook has a long history and tradition of supporting small businesses, starting in 2011, we've developed training programs where we would go across the country, across the world, meeting with small businesses to ensure that they are educated on the most up-to-date technology of our platforms, making sure they know how to leverage them in the right way to reach their customers. We knew that there was something more that we needed to do. And so about a month and a half ago, our COO, Sheryl Sandberg, announced a $100 million grant commitment to the small business community, ensuring that we were doing our small part in supporting the community financially. We have developed and adapted so many of our trainings for free that small businesses can log on to facebook.com/business and see that there are resiliency toolkits and sector by sector guides to help navigate through this crisis. Also, pointing people to outside resources so that they can help navigate during these challenging times.
Wow, $100 million, that's amazing. How do people find out about that? Can you tell us a little bit about some of the small businesses that are part of that? Can you tell us about
Sure.
how Facebook is implementing those grants?
Absolutely. So in the United States, the applications actually just closed, but it was a grant opportunity for cities that are in our debt where we work and operate.
and live. And so in our, where we have offices and data centers, we've committed, the total would be $4,000 value per grant, which is majority cash and then also optional ad credits. We wanted to make sure that we were helping the smaller end of the small businesses. So people who, businesses that employ between 2 and 50 employees, were able to tell us about how they've been negatively impacted by COVID, and to also tell us a little bit about themselves and how they will use the money to impact their communities. Because we know that giving back and supporting the full community is incredibly important. And so wanting to hear from the businesses themselves how they would use the funds to support. And we are for those of you who are international, the program is global. And so while the US has just closed, the certain countries will be opening up shortly.
Yeah, I know that, I think when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that the grants wouldn't apply in Greece, but that Facebook is doing some interesting work in Greece and helping its community in Greece. Are you able to tell us a little bit about what they're doing there?
Sure, and it's really very similar about what we're doing across the globe. And so many elected officials and your health authorities are using the platform to keep their constituents and their members of the community safe and informed. We're making sure that elected officials are able to use our local alerts program so that they can effectively communicate with their constituents. We're ensuring that there are disaster maps, and there's a symptom survey that we've launched out of our Data for Good project that allows for people to opt into the symptom survey, as we're partnering with Johns Hopkins and Carnegie Mellon to help health authorities and experts really track and combat this virus. And do not worry, your privacy was designed with privacy in mind, and so it is completely anonymized data that is being reviewed, but it's ensuring that we are using our platforms to help best inform those who can combat the virus.
So do you think we're going to be using Facebook differently in this new era, in this new world, or will things revert to previous usage? What do you foresee?
Well, it's been incredibly interesting to watch how people are adapting and using the platform. And it's not just the ways that I had mentioned earlier about the products that we've delivered, where it's the Faith Hub or the Community Help Center or Information Center. It's also really what people are organically doing. And so you will have seen musicians host concerts on Instagram Live or digital dance parties. People are using our Facebook groups to give back to society. And so one of my favorite stories is that there's a group in Delaware in the United States that is centered around sewing. It's a group of individuals who really like to sew, and they connect this way. Obviously, they have not been able to get together to do this, to sew together. But what they've been doing is using the platform to feel the community, to do this together, to sew together, but they're creating garb and materials for healthcare workers so that they can use this time and their talents to give back. And that's what you're seeing all across the world, is how people are turning to the platforms to really combat social isolation, and to really feel that sense of connectivity, which was exactly why Facebook was created in the first place, was to connect communities.
Yeah, it's a time when we really need it, and it's wonderful that we have opportunities through Facebook. It seems like people were thinking about how connectivity was changing as we were moving more to a digital world where we weren't connecting in person as much, and now it seems like we're finding that those digital platforms are really a key way to keep us together, even though we can't be physically together. So Diana, before you were at Facebook, you had some other really interesting positions that you held. You're now in DC. What originally brought you to DC? What sparked your passion in policy and politics?
So I was lucky from a very early age to know that government and politics and this idea of civil service was just something I was fascinated by and wanted to pursue. I think that there is just so much good that can come out of working for your government, working for elected officials. And I was so incredibly lucky to start off with an internship down here as I was going through university, I got the bug as soon as I was here, and I didn't want to leave. And so I was so lucky to also have very encouraging parents who allowed me to just say, I don't want to go to law school. I'm going to give this a try. I can always go to law school if I want, but I just need to figure this out. And I was lucky enough to be supported by family the entire way. And so I moved to DC right after college, stayed here for a couple of years, took some chances to work on other political campaigns that took me to New York City, to New Hampshire, then back to New York City, and inevitably drove me back to DC, where I've been since the end of 2012.
And you worked in the White House. The whole Hellenic community is so proud of you. We're thrilled to have someone smart and amazing like you making an impact in our country. Tell us about working in the White House, some fun stories, your favorite Obama interaction.
It was the honor of my life, and I was so incredibly lucky to work with such incredible people who are brilliant and good-humored most of the time, and really wanting to make a difference. And I was very fortunate, again, to be supported by the Hellenic community. I've worked with probably so many of you on the phone to help advance some of our own issues that needed to be addressed. But my favorite Obama story, I should say, it's a little embarrassing, but the best of them are, is that I was waiting with a group of CEOs outside of the Roosevelt, in the Roosevelt room, waiting to bring in about 7 or 8 captains of industry to meet with the president in the Oval Office to discuss the international trade deals that were happening at that time, and TPP specifically. And I had never been into the Oval Office before in this type of meeting, and I accidentally opened the wrong door to the Oval. The president was not ready to receive the group, although he quickly leapt into action, but making sure that he paid attention to the people that that he was about to meet with, I had to quickly duck out of the way to make sure that he could meet with the CEOs who he was there to meet with. He and I had a nice little laugh about that later that day, but it was probably my favorite moment, and also one of those where I cannot believe that just happened.
Diana, for people who've worked in politics, you get the political bug, like you mentioned, and it's exciting to be inside the Beltway, be in DC, especially work at the White House. Was it difficult for you to make that transition to the private sector after having had, quite a career, in politics?
Well, I was really lucky in that sense, where I had always been at the nexus of government and business. And so even though while I was always on the political or government side, I was always working with the business community. And so had a sense of the operations of the private sector and what really could be done with the resources and the infrastructure that comes with working for a private company. And so I think I was a little bit more mentally prepared to make that leap. I also kind of thought that it was about time to go learn even more so what I had been talking about this entire time. And so I was so lucky to take the opportunity that I knew at the end of the Obama administration, no matter how it ended up or who was going to win the election, I was going to move into the private sector to really make that jump.
Mm-hmm. Is this position Facebook, was this position created, or had this position existed before, the one that you're currently at?
It had existed before, although had been vacant for a little bit, but the company places great efforts around supporting the small business community and really making sure that our platforms are being leveraged for individuals to grow, to create their business, to grow their business, to scale. You've seen some amazing business stories, of businesses launching on Instagram and following through them through these life cycles, and then in help with our platforms, they've been able to become larger successes. And we really want to provide everyone that equal opportunity by using our platforms. Our platforms are free, and so allows you to start, if you have an idea, you can start your business on Facebook.
Amazing.
Speaking of what Peter was mentioning, that transition from the private sector to the public sector, or rather from the public sector to the private sector, I'm sure there are a lot of skills that you learned in the public sector that apply to your current role. What are some of those things that you learned that really give you a leg up, make you strong, really strong leader in your current role?
I would say that throughout my career, I've been generally in external facing roles, or in roles that require a lot of cross-departmental collaboration. And so, that it's always, you are not singularly responsible for one product, for one press release, for one event, for one policy. There's always a team working together to move the ball forward. And so being able to work across functions, work with different personalities, sometimes in very siloed institutions, is something that I have found that has been incredibly important to do, and knowing how to maneuver within the structure and work with your colleagues, no matter where they are. Now they could be in engineering, they could be in marketing, they could be in policy, for me, but knowing how to who you can work well with and to really move the ball forward has been one of the greatest lessons of my political career and where I am currently.
So for our listeners, how do you do that well? How do you, for some people listening and wanting to learn about how to be good at moving the ball forward, what can you teach us about how to do that effectively?
I mean, I think you always have to remember that you're working in a team, and what are the skill sets and the perspectives that you bring to a specific project, but then also completely valuing what another person with another skill set and another perspective will also bring to that, and figuring out how you work well together and mesh those. I am a complete Luddite. I know how to use our very basic tools, but in no way am I close to being an engineer or anyone with any tech savvy outside of general use. And so I know that I'm coming to a problem with a certain solution in mind, or ideas of how we could address something. But I'm so incredibly lucky to learn every single day from my colleagues about what's even possible. And what's great about working at a place like Facebook that is so innovative and so entrepreneurial is that if someone has an idea, you'll be supported to see if it will materialize. And so being able to work as a team is just incredibly important, and has allowed for some really fun products to come out of that.
So speaking of diverse teams, often we think of the technology sector as a male-dominated industry. You're a woman who's found herself to be really successful in that space. How do you leverage, gender diversity, and how do you find it to be as you navigate the tech sector?
It's interesting. I mean, I would say I'm in the tech sector for a little under a year, but what I've seen out of the leadership of our company has been surprising in a way, in the sense that I feel very supported. The leaders that I see, our COO Sheryl Sandberg wrote the book on it, but those are values that are real and instilled within the company. But I would say the majority of my leadership and the colleagues that I work with are women, and they're strong women, and they're women with families and juggling 8,000 different things. But everyone is coming to work with some empathy, with some encouragement, and really just wanting to be effective and get the job done. It has been incredible to see how many women I'm surrounded by that are just incredibly talented and well supported.
That's awesome. That's really great to hear. And we're all glad to see that you're continuing to break glass ceilings and you have amazing support around you. We're in the middle of this crisis, and I understand that you have participated in helping with another crisis as well in your previous role. Diana was a part of addressing the Zika response. So I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about what that was like.
It was a matter of, so we had been tracking the Zika virus and the outbreak in Brazil and across the globe, obviously quite closely. It was coming to Puerto Rico at the time where I was brought into the project. And the biggest part of my role in that was finding out how we could rally the private sector and our external organizations and community organizations to, one, potentially build and create products that could help stem and curb the spread of Zika. What were the types of communication mediums that we could use that would really resonate with people? And so whether it was working with the airlines or transit authorities or with SC Johnson and other companies to really focus in on how they could harness their resources and communication efforts, because it was something that if people weren't necessarily paying attention, they wouldn't have noticed that, oh, I didn't know that a mosquito could travel through my suitcase and on an airplane, and I didn't know that I needed to wear repellent for 3 weeks after being somewhere that may have been impacted by Zika. And so a lot of it was so focused on getting the right communication and information out there in a non-threatening way, but in a very educating and informative and action-oriented way, so that people didn't feel scared, but they knew and were prepared with what they needed to do to keep themselves safe.
So I'm gonna interrupt here for a second, because we're 33 minutes into this talk and we're being bombarded with questions. So I think it might be a good time, Eunice and Diana, to sort of transition into some questions from the audience. Why don't I start? This is from John in Los Angeles, who asks to Diana, how is Facebook trying to control the amount of fake news that's coming out around COVID-19?
Sure, and thank you for that question. So we have acted quite quickly around any misinformation or disinformation on COVID. And so we are working closely with and following the WHO, the CDC, and health authorities, that if there is misinformation on anything that contradicts health authorities, we are taking it down.
I have a few other questions from the audience, but Peter, if you have any, please go ahead and jump in.
I'm going to ask one more that just came in. It's actually from Mary in Washington, D.C. I think this is going back to something that you mentioned earlier. Her question is, was your past work experience looked upon kindly in the interview process for Facebook?
It was. It absolutely was. I mean, those who work at Facebook have incredibly diverse backgrounds, and you really are supported for who you are and what you bring to the company. It's not just something that they say during orientation. I do actually feel it. And so the experience of being able to work within complex organizations that are fast moving, that are mission oriented, that know, and you have deadlines. For anyone who's worked in government or in politics, you know that you only have a finite period of time to get done what you need to get done. That election is happening whether you've joined in the year before or 30 days before. You can't move that line. And you know that you have a deadline and you need to work every way that you can to get there. And I think that that is something that is certainly valued at my current company, making sure that we know how to drive things towards a goal and meet them.
Okay. Eunice, I know we're getting bombarded with questions, so go ahead, Eunice.
A lot of curious questions. You're a popular person, Diana. They're really diverse. Well, I'll start with one that we have. The question is, are you or were you involved in any way in Hellenic related policy matters, perhaps related to Hellenic foreign relations or other ways?
I worked a little bit on the Greek financial crisis and kind of what our response was going to be, and actually worked really closely with the National Economic Council when we reached out to the Greek community, Greek business community, and solicited advice, especially those who had very close ties to, back and had operations in Greece at the time and in the U.S. We the beauty of my former job at the White House was being a liaison to the business community and just to our and to other affinity groups. I was very lucky to have owned the Greek relationships at that point. And so being able to bridge those two and kind of make sure that the views of Greek Americans and Greek American business owners who had operations in Greece had an opportunity to voice their concerns or their opinions, and so that we could hear from those who were being affected was really important. And I felt really lucky to have that role.
Okay, this question is from Jim. What changes to federal or state government policies is Facebook hoping to affect currently?
What changes?
That's a big question.
What kind of policy changes is Facebook hoping to affect or influence?
I think right now we are very focused on our response to COVID and making sure that everyone is feeling safe. We want to make sure that we are supporting the small business community, the health community, the faith community, and we're going to do everything that we can to ensure that our platforms are being used to help the communities that we can. Thank
you. I have another question that says, given that Facebook's a global company and has insights globally on COVID-19, could you share some of those global insights, some of the findings that Facebook has? How does Facebook digest that information and share it with its global community?
Sure, and so I actually would encourage anyone to visit our information center, which is facebook.com/COVID support. It does actually show some of the more interesting interactions that we've seen. We are making sure that we continue to iterate and ideate on ways that we can continue to help the community, and so anything that people are proactively sharing with us, we're taking to heart. I mentioned the Data for Good project that we've started. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we are really trying to help health experts and researchers track and defeat this virus. And so again, with completely anonymized data and completely voluntary across the globe, where if someone receives a prompt on their page to check off if they've had certain symptoms, this is now, again, anonymized, but going back to Carnegie Mellon and Johns Hopkins to make sure that we're doing what we can to best inform the public. And that's actually, the symptom survey is actually public information. And so you can go on our information hub and see a little bit more for yourself, our findings.
Dinah, we have a question from someone here in Greece, actually, asking, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur in Greece on how to use Facebook's platform to further a business?
Sure. So we're actually offering lots of free trainings and e-curriculum and learning platforms. So if you go to our website, facebook.com/business, you'll be able to see lots of different tools and trainings, a course on digital marketing that would be really helpful to one, meet you where you are in terms of your comfort level with Facebook and using Instagram, but also will help guide you through different techniques, what we've seen to be tried and true to fit your specific needs. So definitely go onto our site to dig in a little bit more on what we have.
Would you mind just telling us what that URL is one more time?
Sure. It's facebook.com/business.
Thank you.
Another
okay.
question. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Eunice.
I have a question about your experience at the Libra group. Could you talk to us about what it was like to launch some of the efforts that you launched there, and tell us about what you did for the Libra group?
Oh, it's such a wonderful experience. And if anyone from the Libra group is on, I miss you all dearly. So spent a wonderful 2 years there, and worked so closely with Jimmy Athanasopoulos, as Peter had mentioned. But in the working for Libra and coming in to work with their social responsibility team, we had they still have 9 philanthropic efforts that that are completely diverse in subject matter. And so there is Hellenic, which is a maternal mental health organization that both treats and sees patients, but also provides guidance and educational trainings for anyone suffering, finding a challenge in the maternal mental health space. We have involved entrepreneurship that both in the US and in Greece, there's the focus on getting entrepreneurship skills and resources into budding entrepreneurs' hands. You know, there's the Libra Internship, which is really what created the entire Libra social responsibility division to begin with. George and his foresight, along with Nick and everybody else on the team, saw what was happening in Greece, and you know, wanted to make sure that they were supporting the youth community as best they could, and so they created the internship program where Libra places interns across the globe in their companies, so that students can get real world experience that is not necessarily a leg up, but it's hopefully an equalizer to make sure that people are getting experience. It was a wonderful time being a part of a family run company and really being able to help affect change through these programs. It was a great experience.
So we have another question, Diana, from John in New Orleans, and this is related to what you were just discussing, because obviously Libra is a company that's owned by a Greek family. But his question is, how have other Greek Americans helped you in your career?
Well, you're definitely talking to one right here. It's my cousin, who's just been the most incredible resource, who I actually didn't get to know really well until much later in my life, and somehow we ended up having a very similar career. And Peter and his family has been an incredible resource. I'm sure the Manitas, I hope the Manitas family is on, but Mike has been an incredible resource throughout. Always, I have found throughout my career that especially Greek Americans are always willing to lend an ear, to lend time, any guidance that you may have, that they may have to impart, especially as I was first entering politics and having this career. I was very lucky to benefit from so many wise individuals who are just willing to share their time and their experiences with me. And then I was always very glad. I was like, oh, well, she's Greek, so, you know, she's a part of the family. We've got to do this. And so I have found that over and over and over.
Yeah, I think we could probably all say that Father Alex has always had a positive effect on careers as well. Yeah.
Very much so. Father Alex has been an incredible resource for all of us.
Yeah. Eunice?
Yeah, I have a question from Violetta in Lake Forest. And this question is, what specific changes in social networks does Facebook see due to COVID?
So that's an interesting question. I think what we are seeing right now is and I touched on this a little bit earlier, but the creativity of how people are using the platforms, and really like how we're able to bring people together in just different ways that I don't know that we all would have expected. I certainly would not have foreseen, you know, a digital dance party on Instagram and people having these, you know, finding ways to connect with one another on, you know, using these social media platforms. So I think you're going to end up seeing the way people use the platforms might adjust a little bit. Instead of potentially scrolling through your news feed or through the photos and seeing what your networks are up to, you might find yourself engaging a little bit more. We launched a product, Messenger chat rooms, to help people use the platform in a more video experience. You know, we have a product called Portal that we're helping, that, you know, really acts as a AI interface to bring people together. I talk with my parents on it almost every other day. And so we're just going to see how else we can continue to adapt, and see how people continue to adapt with the platform.
Another question about the platform. This question is from Alec. Alec was curious if you could talk to us about some of the ways that Facebook is planning to manage and get ahead of any disinformation related to elections as we approach an election cycle.
Yeah, so take extreme care when it comes to election integrity, and we are making incredible efforts to ensure that we take down any information that violates any of our policies. We have an entire we have a moderating team that helps us make sure that anyone who is using the platform is using it as it's intended. So there are increased efforts, and always efforts, but increased efforts to make sure that that people are using the platform in a safe and healthy way, and also ensuring for freedom of speech.
We have a couple of questions related to Greece. This question is from Maria, and she was just curious about if you like to visit Greece, where you like to go, whether you might be able to make it there this summer or sometime soon.
I hope so. As soon as we are allowed to travel, I will be on a plane over to Athens immediately. I was so lucky to spend about a week and a half there last summer. Paros is certainly my favorite location so far, though there's obviously so much more to explore. I did not grow up visiting as often as some do, but ever since I've kind of gotten my first taste of Greece, I've made it a commitment to come back every year. Of course, I made that commitment about 2 years ago, and I have followed up on it for the last 2 years. We'll see if I can get there this year to make it 3 for 3.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to. I'll be on that flight with you, no matter what it takes. Yeah, I'll be there. I can't wait to see everyone who's on this call. I hope we all get to be together in Greece very, very soon. Yes. We have a great question about Greek startups from Michael. This is a question about your personal thoughts on looking at tech businesses, because you're a part of such an impactful technology company and you're involved so much in the technology space. What are some thoughts that you have for Greek startups? And what are some things that you look at when you're assessing quality technology companies? What are some pieces of advice that you might be able to provide to those startup founders?
Sure. So I will say that on the tech side, that is not my experience, and kind of how it is that I work at Facebook. Anything that goes, essentially on a word processor is super impressive to me. But there are just so many. There's so many great ideas coming out of Greece. The entrepreneurial spirit comes out of Greece, and I think everyone on the phone and on the Zoom knows that. I think that's why the Hellenic Entrepreneurship Awards, and which later evolved into Involve Greece, was started by the Libra Group in partnership with THI. How that came to be in the first place is because there's such drive and the entrepreneurial spirit that comes out of Greece. And so I think it's being scrappy. I think it's being adaptable. I think you will find folks who are finding ways to quickly pivot their either current business or their business model during COVID. Will find themselves in a more sustainable place, I hope. It's going to take a lot, but I think there have been so many articles about how Greece has responded to the crisis in particular, and so well, that I hope that you all are ahead of the game in that sense.
I think we've been bombarding you with questions, and I have to say you've done an excellent job, of answering all of these, Diana. I think we'll just take 2 more questions,
Sure.
And then we'll have our closing. You can say some closing remarks. So we have a question from Tanya, and in fact, this is a very meaningful question for us as an organization as well, because it's something we're very concerned about right now. The question is, how does Facebook see itself as being involved in helping in the post-COVID mental health crisis? Potential screening mechanisms.
So I can't necessarily talk to screening mechanisms, but what I will say is that we are all very concerned about what this crisis is doing to everyone's mental health. And we are definitely taking steps and creating new products and new portals to help individuals kind of manage a little bit more. You'll see some interesting things, I think, hopefully coming out in the next month or so. But one of the ways that we have doubled down in the crisis around this space is our commitment to fighting addiction, especially around the opioid crisis. So for those in the US, the opioid crisis has been this unbelievable plague and drain on our families and our system, and has created quite the crisis. And what we did was we created a helpline and a destigmatization campaign and we enlisted and recruited respected authorities, elected officials participated, all about the destigmatization of the opioid crisis and fighting addiction. We also helped launch a chat bot there. If someone was feeling in distress, that they could reach out to the chat bot, and it could help direct you to local resources to help you in your time. And so thank you for that question. I think it is something that we all need to seriously think about in our current practices, how we move forward, both individually and as in kind of a corporate social responsibility perspective as well.
Thank you. So, and I think a final question, and it's a very good question. This comes from Michael in Athens. Could Facebook be part of the COVID-19 solution? Meaning, can location-based services like the one Facebook is using help us identify COVID patients and therefore isolate more efficiently?
So I think that goes back to our Data for Good project and our symptom survey. I think, one of the benefits and what we have to provide is this platform of billions of people across the world who are active in using and interacting with the platform. And if people are opt into this survey when prompted, they can be you as an individual can be a part of the solution to fight this virus and to fight the spread. And so we are certainly going to do our part with making sure people have the right information, that we're providing the resources that individuals and businesses need, the faith communities need. I mean, we are going to continue doing our part. And again, we're going to continue to iterate and ideate on any other ways that we can help support communities. But if people are responsibly using the platform and helping us to inform our research partners and our other partners, it'll go a really long way to making sure that we all play this role in fighting COVID.
Okay, so I lied. I have somebody begging to ask one more question. So, it says, since you're working for one of the largest companies in the world, do you think that the whole office world that everyone is now used to will suddenly change? Meaning, will more people start working from home? Your opinion.
Yeah, I can't say that from a Facebook perspective, for sure. But what I have seen is that there has been certainly an adaptation to how we all do work. I mean, again, I have the luxury, and I want to say that it is a luxury. Not everyone is afforded these kinds of opportunities where I can work from home. I am currently looking at my little square patch of lawn at the same time that I'm able to talk to you and have a productive conversation. Not everybody gets that opportunity. So many people who are frontline workers, who are healthcare workers, but also who are part of the delivery services, who are putting their lives on the line to make sure that we can all live this way. We are certainly going to do all that we can to make it easier for people to connect and to be productive online. As I mentioned, we have some hardware that's called Portal, which is how we do a lot of our meetings, allowing communities and other workforces to connect. I imagine that it will take a while for people to go back into offices, but of course that's up to to states and different governments to dictate. But I imagine that this will change the way we kind of all work and interact for quite some time.
Thank you. I think that's a nice way to end this, and to say thank you to you, and thank you to Eunice. Eunice, I don't know if you have any final comments or thoughts.
Well, thank you so much, Diana, for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your expertise and information about your valuable career experiences. We really appreciate you being a part of THI. Thank you to all the viewers today. We wish we could be together in person. We look forward to when we can be, and we're just really grateful that we could be together with you today virtually. THI is a remarkable community and truly a family. And so thank you for your support of the organization. Thank you for furthering its mission to do good for people in Greece of all different backgrounds and in a variety of different ways. You're amazing supporters, and it's great to be part of this with you. Thank you, Peter, for your remarkable organization, for keeping everything always running on track, always ahead of the schedule, and keeping THI on top of doing a lot of really important good.
Thank you, Eunice. I also just want to take 1 minute, since we actually have 2 minutes left, to thank you and your family, to thank Diana for being here. I'd like to mention that, again, we're running a campaign, as THI is running a campaign as a response to COVID-19. Eunice mentioned a lot of the areas, that we're focused on, including helping cancer patients, helping people, who are suffering, from mental health issues, helping a palliative care organization. This is what we do. We've received contributions from around the world. You can find out about the campaign by logging on to THI's site at www.thehellenicinitiative.org. And we also have the information on Facebook, on the Hellenic Initiative's Facebook page. Please go ahead and join that. And you can see all the information there on the campaign as well. Thank you, everyone. We'll be having a talk next Wednesday with Ioana Dreta, who's the CEO of Marketing Greece. I'm talking about how, what the future looks like for tourism in Greece, given what's going on with COVID-19, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.